What's up, everyone? Another week, another elite safety prospect to break down here on the film room, and I'll just jump right into it. I understand why people might prefer Malik Hooker to Jamal Adams. That's not a call that I would personally make, but I get it. There's a legitimate argument there. And if you want to see the Adams side of the discussion, you can of course go back to last week's episode and see my rather lengthy dissertation about what makes him such a special football player. But for the sake of fairness, I'll forget all about that today and make the case why Malik Hooker and not Adams should be the first safety off the board. And what that case really all boils down to is one word: range. You'll see that word in every single scouting report on Hooker. You'll see it brought up in every single discussion on TV about him. It's all about range. So before I show you how his range was put into use at Ohio State, let's just take a moment to talk about what that is and how it can help your defense at the safety position. Let's say I'm running a standard cover 3 or cover 1 defense, which has been all the rage in the NFL these last few years because of how the Legion of Boom popularized it under Pete Carroll. There's a lot of reasons why you want to run cover 3, most notably the fact that dropping down one of your safeties into the box gives you a lot of flexibility against the run. If your box safety is an effective run stopper and can be relied on to play that force roll on the edge, like say Seattle's Cam Chancellor, then that gives your defense one extra man down there to give you a numbers advantage against the run, which can of course lead to more third and long situations where your pass rushers can actually get after the quarterback. And as far as coverage and pass rush is concerned on those passing downs, usually those cover 3 looks have 3 zones deep, 4 zones underneath, and 4 players getting upfield to rush the passer. Hooker, as the free safety, is playing that center field role in between the boundary zones that both cornerbacks are playing. Now, the weaknesses to this defense, which you see exploited all the time, are either deep shots to these seams on either side of the safety, or this hole over the middle underneath the deep safety and behind the linebackers, which takes a long time to develop because usually the only way you could hit that spot is with like a deep dig or a nod post from the slot that may or may not get your receiver destroyed by a big hit. Or another option, and this is what the Patriots did in the Super Bowl, you take advantage of the huge spacing you get against only 4 underneath defenders, and you slice up the defense with smaller, quicker running backs that can run routes and make plays in space, or slot receivers that can run routes and make plays in space underneath. Atlanta runs predominantly a cover 3 defense, or when the ball's placed in the hashes, they go into a lot of cover 6 looks, which is a whole different animal, but they share a lot of the same principles. But anyway, James White, a running back for the Patriots, set a Super Bowl record with 14 catches, 110 yards, and 3 touchdowns out of the backfield against that cover 3 and cover 6 base. So trust me when I say that style of defense can get wrecked underneath if you're going against a running back that matches up well with linebackers in space and people start missing tackles after the catch. Just ask Atlanta. However, if your defense can rally and tackle and keep those running backs from doing all the work by themselves, like Seattle's usually able to do, then the offense's only option is to pretty much rely on the deep ball and other longer developing passing plays that give their pass rushers more time to get home. And that's where Hooker comes in. The most popular way to attack this style of defense downfield, by far, is to hit them in either of these 2 deep seams. It can be with a tight end, it can be with a wide receiver making a late stem inside on his route, it can even be with a running back that's motioned out into the slot. These 2 seams are where they're going to try to get chunk plays. So having a safety with the speed to get from one seam to the other as the ball's in the air, that's huge. That speed extends the range of where the safety can get while the ball's in flight. And the more range you have, the easier it is for you to get that breakup or just outright intercept it and take it back the other way. Going back to the example of Seattle's defense, the reason why Pete Carroll took Earl Thomas in the first round of his first ever draft as the Seahawks coach was because he knew he was going to run a cover 3 and he needed to have a rangy free safety that can take away those passes at the seams. Or if they're in man cover 1, he needed a safety with the range to actually help his corners over the top instead of just being vaguely in the area but not fast enough to actually make a difference. You have to be able to cover a lot of ground to make that system work, and Earl has that range with his 4.4 speed. Malik Hooker's the same guy. He erases the biggest weakness of a cover 3 because no quarterback in their right mind is ever going to test him over the middle. More often than not, he'll beat the receiver to the ball, so the risk just isn't worth it to a quarterback. You look at Ohio State's game against Clemson in the playoffs, I mean, they had an arsenal of weaponry on that Clemson offense. Mike Williams, Artavis Scott, Jordan Leggett, Deion Kane. I mean, you go down the line and literally every single skill position player and their quarterback are all going to play in the NFL. And what's amazing is that they didn't test Malik Hooker over the middle in either of those two seams once during the entire game. Not once. They stuck to the boundaries whenever they threw deep because they would rather test Ohio State's corners, who are also both going to be first-round picks, mind you, rather than test Malik Hooker. That's the kind of fear he creates. You would rather test a first-round corner than him. That's why, to me, he's the boogeyman of this draft class. It's the same fear that Earl Thomas creates in quarterbacks, that Ed Reed created in his prime, that Rod Woodson created before that, and it has a very real, tangible effect on the game. And what's incredible is that even when Clemson kept taking shots to that boundary, eventually Hooker was still able to get his hands on the ball simply because of how gifted he is. Second quarter, Deshaun Watson is rolling right on a design rollout here because he's taking a shot to Hunter Renfrow, which again, just like we talked about last week with Jamal Adams, that's like holding up a big neon sign saying, hey, I'm throwing the ball to this side of the field, see if you can go get it. So Hooker sees that rollout, reads the throws going deep to that boundary, and takes off. He's not even looking at the receiver, he's just tracking Watson and the ball the entire time. He makes a spectacular adjustment while it's in the air, gets his feet down in bounds, and gives Ohio State a much needed turnover at the time. They still got blown out in the end, yes, but to me that doesn't take away from what I consider to be a spectacular overall performance from Hooker on the night. In the Wisconsin game earlier in the year, the Badgers only threw one seam against him the entire night, and it wasn't even when he was lined up in center field. He was all the way on the hash, and they threw it outside the other hash on a low trajectory, so realistically he never had any shot to get there in the first place. And the only other seam route they threw in that entire game wasn't even against him. It was against the other safety, Damon Webb, who is nowhere near as gifted as Hooker, and he gave up a touchdown. Just seeing Hooker's range throughout the season and how fast he was able to close on passes and read the ball in the air, I guarantee you that if he was lined up center field on this snap instead of Webb, that ball never would have been caught. Hell, it probably would never have even been thrown because nobody ever wanted to test him over the middle after like week 4. He's just way too good, has way too much range, and his ball skills are incredible. The guy wears 3XL gloves, he's got huge hands, and catches everything thrown his way. It's hard for me to put into words how rare this combination of speed, ball skills, and fluidity is in a safety. A lot of the times you'll find one or two of those things, but not all three. Hooker's got all three. They even put him in the slot to cover tight ends and receivers in off-man coverage, and even though I don't really consider him to have clean technique, he's just so athletically gifted that nobody could get away from him. And even when he wasn't playing center field, he was still able to jump passes and get interceptions. His knack for getting the ball is just uncanny. You can put him anywhere on the field, and somehow, some way, he's gonna get an interception eventually, and possibly even a touchdown right after that with his terrific speed. I'm not even joking, he set the Ohio State career record for interceptions returned for touchdowns, and he only started one season. That's insane. His kind of ability to really flip games in your favor is unbelievably rare. Take the Clemson game for example again, he's capped over the tight end Jordan Leggett in the slot, which is usually a red flag to the offense that the slot corner is blitzing. And in this case, it's absolutely true because the slot corner is blitzing. And Hooker's primary responsibility on this play is playing that hook to curl zone against Leggett, who's the hot receiver against this blitz. And because it's zone, he's not really playing Leggett's route so much as he's playing against Watson's eyes. If it was a man coverage call behind the blitz, then yeah, he'd be securing the route first and foremost. But because it's a zone call, he's got a little bit more flexibility to play the ball aggressively instead of the receiver, and that kind of plays into his strengths. So he sees Watson immediately look at the blitz and look at Leggett as his hot, and once his eyes are locked on target, Hooker knows right where the ball is going, and he makes a hell of a break. This is really where his explosiveness shows up. And it's a shame that the ball was knocked down, because if it got through the line and was left in the air, look at where Hooker was when the ball landed. That's an interception and likely a pick 6 taken off the board just from pure blind luck in favor of Clemson. If that ball was not tipped, Hooker would have had 2 interceptions in one half, one of which likely went for a touchdown, and Ohio State would have had some momentum only down 10 points going into halftime. He could have completely flipped that game on its head with one play. But football is a game of inches, and sometimes the bounces just don't go your way. It happens, but the important lesson to take home here is that Hooker has the instinct and the athleticism to capitalize on those opportunities when they're given to him. In 2015, when he was still on the Buckeyes scout team, he had 40 interceptions in one season going against the Ohio State starters. 40. 4-0. That is absurd. Practice or not, that is disgusting to me that Ohio State had the luxury of having this kind of talent sitting there on the bench as a backup. That's crazy to me. And what sucks for Hooker is that I do think the fact that he only started one season as a redshirt sophomore kind of hurts him. He's shown himself to be highly adept at playing the pass as both a man and zone defender, but in terms of finding his run fits, taking good angles, and actually making tackles and preventing long runs from getting ripped off to the edges, he's got a long way to go. Only starting a finite number of games, and remember, it's not like he played football as his main sport his entire life. His first love was basketball. But having that limited starting experience in football has caused him to take some of the worst angles to the ball I have ever seen when he's going after ball carriers in space. Like, it is painful to watch sometimes how 7 or 8 yard runs turn into something way bigger simply because Hooker lost the ball behind the line of scrimmage, or he read his keys late, he filled his lane incorrectly, or just completely misjudged someone's speed at the edge. It happened almost every game, and it was infuriating, but it's also a symptom of his inexperience. This is just something that takes kind of a while to get used to in terms of judging your run fits, keeping your head up, and tackling through the body instead of at their ankles. I mean, he's still very much a puppy in this game. He's gonna do shit like that until he gets more reps under his belt. It's not like I've never seen him make a form tackle. There's plenty of examples of those, and it's not like he's unwilling to make a form tackle, so I know he can do it. When he puts that athleticism to work in the open field, keeps himself square, head up, drive through the hips, I mean, it is pretty. He looks like he can be a great tackler in the open field, but the consistency is just not there yet. So early in his career, I think he's going to have to be protected quite a bit by his linebackers and defensive ends, and they're going to have to make sure that these runs don't get outside. Because if they do, I'm not so sure that Hooker's going to be much help until these pursuit angles improve. So, in conclusion, if you are taking Malik Hooker as the first safety off the board, ideally you're going to run a cover 3 base defense that puts him in center field, where he can just be a ball hawk and generate turnovers. And I've said this many times before, unless you have a rangy free safety that can actually protect those seams and be the boogeyman over the middle, cover 3 is not going to work. There needs to be an element of fear there, because that fear is the engine that makes the whole rest of the system actually work. That avoidance of the seams pretty much relegates quarterbacks into either making very difficult throws to the boundary or just checking it down all day and basically giving up all hope of ever getting a chunk play. A good center fielder makes life easier on your corners, it makes it easier on your linebackers, and it definitely makes it easier on your defensive line. Without a doubt, unequivocally, free safety is the most important position you can fill in this style of defense. So if you're planning on running it full time and you're in position to take someone who can play that role at an all-pro level, you better take him. I'm looking at you, 49ers. You literally just hired a former safety as your general manager. Don't overthink it, just take him. Alright, that's all I got for this week. Next week, I'm going to be taking a look at the modern safety's greatest natural enemy, the tight end. In particular, we're looking at Alabama's O.J. Howard, who is quite possibly the most spectacular blend of size, athleticism, and technical refinement that we've seen enter the NFL since Rob Gronkowski. And if he was the first Crimson Tide player to even be drafted, I would not be shocked at all. And I'm not even joking, Howard is that physically gifted that if he leapfrogged Reuben Foster and Jonathan Allen in the draft order, I would not be surprised in the least. All these names you see on the screen right now are everybody who has contributed to my Patreon account so far. I just want to say thank you to everyone. It really means a lot to me to see you open your wallets and give to the channel and try to help me get to a point where I can do this full time and sustain myself financially. Words really can't express how thankful I am for that. I just appreciate all of you so much, and you can expect more content from me every single week as my personal thank you gift to everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So with that, until next week, later.